The Barbarian Betrayal. Prologue. Professor? I think you might want to come see this. Dr. Amjad Dimitriou looked up from the pottery shard he was examining. What is it? He asked curiously. His research assistant shook her head. That's just it, we're not really sure. We've found a cache of artifacts in the southeastern quadrant, and quite frankly, they don't seem to fit with anything else we've uncovered so far. He smiled and gently stowed the fragment away. Then by all means, let's have a look. The pair stepped out of the prefabricated hut and began making their way down to the dig site. Xenoarchaeology was a relatively new branch of science, but it drew heavily from its roots. While the canvas tents of old had long been replaced with more sturdy structures, many of the tools they still used would be instantly recognizable to their predecessors. That being said, they were also fortunate to have new technologies at their disposal as well. Precision instruments that Howard Carter and Rishad Leakey would have cheerfully killed for. We were excavating Phase 37 Alpha in Section 14 when we found them, his assistant explained. Professor Dobhoz is currently examining the relics in situ. He's the one that asked me to come find you. 37. Alpha. That's the dwelling we uncovered, yes? Dimitriou asked, after taking a moment to dig through his mental files. That's right, she nodded. At first glance, it appeared to be of typical post and thatch construction. The charcoal deposits indicated the dwelling was destroyed in a fire, and we'd already uncovered a nearby midden. In fact, that was where we were concentrating our efforts, when the GPR came back with some really odd returns. The professor frowned. What sort of returns? The site hasn't been contaminated, has it? He asked with sudden concern. I don't know, she admitted. That was my first thought, only now. She shook her head again. I realize this is an alien planet, and we're bound to run across the occasional enigma. But this... She gave him a worried look. I've never seen anything like it. They carefully picked their way through the excavation, passing other assistants carefully sifting the tailings for smaller fragments. You've certainly managed to get my attention, he said wryly, as they climbed down the ladder to the latest dig site, where they spotted the Ophipteran scientist kneeling on the dirt floor. He glanced up as they approached, waving them in closer. Come, come, he said excitedly. This is most intriguing, he chortled. Amjad knelt down beside him, peering into the small void they'd unearthed. What are we looking at? He asked. I do not know, he said gleefully. Isn't that delightful? The human looked closer and froze. Wait, is that metal? He said in disbelief. It is. And the GPR has confirmed this. The alien professor could barely contain himself. This will make for quite the thesis. That's impossible, Dimitriou managed to get out, once he'd found his voice again. The Akuba were Neolithic, they had no metallurgy. Or so we thought, Dobhoz exclaimed. Obviously we were in error. Now hold on. Let's not allow our enthusiasms get the better of us, Amjad cautioned. We've been on Omicron Ursae Majoris for months now, and so far we have no evidence whatsoever of any metallic items. No bronze, no iron, not even gold or silver. Not only that, we've found no forges, no mining sites. So how can there be metallic artifacts now? He sighed unhappily. Professor, this has to be some form of contamination. Perhaps they traded with other tribes, the Ophipteran suggested. After all, we have only begun to scratch the surface of this world. It is quite possible other groups were more advanced. Maybe, he said dubiously, but you'd think we'd have seen some evidence of that by now. Beads, nails, something. He scratched his chin for a moment while he pondered the dilemma. What about the stratigraphy? Has the site been disturbed in any way? The stratigraphy is consistent with the adjacent areas, he riposted, his vestigial wings fluttering rapidly. In fact, I am currently awaiting the results of the radiocarbon tests we performed on the bone shards we found intermixed with the artifacts. Dimitriou slowly nodded. That would certainly help pin this down, he admitted. If the dates were consistent with the rest of the site. One of the other assistants appeared before he could finish the sentence and handed Dobhoz a tablet. Moments later, he was bounding to his feet, thrusting the tablet into the human's hands. See for yourself, he asserted. 18,400 of your Earth years, with a margin of less than 200. It cannot be contamination. Amjad read the report and then read it again. He rose to his feet as well, still shaking his head. Okay, I'll admit this makes for compelling evidence, he said at last. But just think about it for a moment. We've been looking for evidence why the Ikuba disappeared, and so far we've come up empty-handed. Then you find this, he said pointedly, tapping the tablet. And the dates for your metal artifacts are eerily close to the time frame when they suddenly died out, for no reason we've managed to find so far. So tell me, what does that suggest to you? The Ophipteran managed to stop fluttering about long enough to consider the question. Are you proposing that these objects are from off-world? He asked. It's a possibility, Demetrio shrugged. I'm certainly not prepared to rule it out just yet, at least. He paused for a moment and looked at his counterpart. Do your people have data that goes back that far? He asked. No, Dobos sighed. That was long before the forming of the Triumvirate. What few records we have from that era are woefully deficient, little more than legends, really. What about the Saurators or the Ronin? He pressed. Any possibilities there? Unlikely, the alien scientist replied. The Saurators were still pre-technic at that point. And as for the Ronin, he paused, and then leaned in conspiratorially. We have learned not to ask, he said quietly. That would be roughly the same era when their creators became extinct. It is a painful memory for them. Much of what they might have retained was purged long ago, rather than relive those dark days. They were only just self-aware when the plague took them, and I believe it greatly traumatized their race as a whole. I understand, Amjad said unhappily. Well then, back to the drawing board, as we say on Earth. Perhaps when we finish removing the artifacts, we will have a better understanding of their purpose and how they came to end up here. Let us hope so, the Ophipteran agreed, when suddenly a strange look came across his face. Is something the matter? Demetrio asked. Not really, it is just that... The scientist paused for a moment. It is my understanding that you humans often have a cynical view of the universe, he said awkwardly. I mean no offense, but... He paused once again, and then shook his head. No, I am certain it is merely a fluke. I'm afraid you've lost me, the archaeologist answered. Dobos took a deep breath. It is just... Does it not strike you as odd that the Ikuba and the Ronin creators both suddenly disappeared, during roughly the same time period? Amjad blinked. Now that you mention it, it is a bit peculiar, he said at last. But it must be just a coincidence. The odds of it being anything more are astronomical. The Ophipteran mulled that over and then nodded. You are right, of course, he agreed. Come, he said happily, his concerns quickly forgotten. We have work to do, and theories to defend. The human chuckled as he followed the alien scientist back to the site. Once they finished excavating, they'd have a better idea of what they were dealing with. Demetrio still thought there was a decent chance it was contamination, though how that was possible eluded him. But of course that was the attraction of archaeology, the mystery. The Barbarian Betrayal, Chapter 1. Stop fussing. Nasat sighed as Tango finished the last-minute touches on his robes. You want to look your best today, don't you? She asked him, as he tried to bear up stoically with her ministrations. You know the media will be there in full force. Why? He asked her. Today has nothing to do with me after all. The comment simply earned him a raised eyebrow. The Sauratore sighed once again. For almost 20 years now, I have done my very best to stay out of the limelight. I am no longer in uniform. I serve in no government position. I attend no events. So why, after all this time, is the media still interested in my comings and goings? Because nothing piques the public's attention like the mysterious, reclusive hero, she chuckled. After all these years, you'd think you'd have figured that out by now. I keep hoping they will forget about me, he said unhappily. If avoiding the public does not work, and embracing their attention even less so, then what does that leave? Absolutely nothing, she grinned. Face it, boss. You're a marked man. Well, Sauratore? Tango made one final adjustment and stepped back. Perfect, she said in approval. Now try not to mess it up until after the ceremony. Nasat inclined his head in thanks as he turned to face the mirror. It was difficult at times to believe the image staring back at him was who he was now. The years had not been unkind, but they had still left their mark. The new lines and wrinkles that seemed to appear almost daily, the thickening around the middle and haunches that stubbornly refused to disappear, despite his best efforts. But most of all, it was the eyes. The humans believed that they were the windows to the soul, and he could not disagree. The eyes that stared back at him belonged to someone much, much older, someone who had borne witness to things he would very much like to forget. And yet he found a smile lurking somewhere within the depths as he turned back to the human. As always, you have managed to transform this aging recluse into something that will not embarrass his children, Nasat informed her, earning him yet another grin. How would I have managed all these years without your ministrations? I think you would have stopped bathing after about 6 months, she smirked, her eyes twinkling, without someone to remind you. The pair shared a brief laugh as his eyes went to the ubiquitous auto pistol she wore in her shoulder rig. Is that truly necessary today? He asked quietly. I hope not, Tango replied, but that doesn't mean I'm leaving any of you unguarded. You still have a few enemies out there, you know, not to mention the random troublemakers. Nasat grimaced but made no further protests. Have they arrived yet? He asked, changing the subject. On their way, she informed him. I assume you want to greet them in the garden? I do, he nodded. I figured as much, she said affably. If I've timed this right, they should be walking through the front door about the time you've settled in your favorite spot. The day your calculations are incorrect is the day the universe stops spinning on its axis, he smiled. Shall we? The human female grinned, leading the way through the house and down to the garden that had come to dominate the landscape around his home. Tango said it was almost Japanese in style, and after she had shown him examples from Earth, he was forced to agree. There were differences, of course, but similar aesthetics and philosophies seemed to abound. It was a quiet place, a place of reflection that calmed his restless spirit. He had just settled in with a view of the meandering stream when Nasat heard someone call out to him. Father? A deep voice inquired, as 2 figures rounded an ornamental shrub, breaking out into smiles as they rushed forward to greet him. Taichaist, Chechla! Let me look at you, he said happily, his hands reaching out to take theirs. He took a moment to simply gaze at them both, marveling yet again at just how much they had grown. How is it you have both managed to grow so big? I distinctly recall holding both of you in my arms as I carried you to bed. Children have been known to do that, Tango observed dryly as she took position at his side. Hello, Tango, Chechla smiled. Have you been looking after Father, despite his complaints? Always, she grinned as his daughter chuckled merrily. It's good to see you two. Place isn't the same without you. Indeed it isn't, Nasat agreed, but it is also true that children must eventually strike out on their own. He smiled wistfully at them both. No matter how much their decrepit old parent may miss them. You are far from decrepit, Father, Taichist smiled. I suspect you could still pass the army physical if you wanted to. He dismissed that with a wave. Then it is a good thing that I do not want to, he smiled as he motioned for both of them to sit down. They each took a seat beside him as he poured tea. Besides, we have much more pleasant things to talk about today. For today I am given the great privilege to see my children receive their official scholastic credentials and take their place among the ranks of those who have gone before. Nasat squeezed both of their hands. I am so very proud of you, he said softly, his voice filled with sudden emotion. His son and daughter each blushed in turn as he nodded to Tango. She magically produced 2 small presents, passing them over as the children looked at him curiously. On the day of your graduation, it is customary to gift the former student with a token, something that announces to the world both who they are and from where they come. Nasat turned first to Chechla, bestowing her a small, flat box. Her brother looked over as she took it with trembling hands, lifting up the hinged lid, before gasping in wonderment as she lifted out a piece of finely wrought jewelry, a sphere suspended within a tetrahedron, dangling from a delicate-looking chain. "It's beautiful," she whispered, as she held it on her palm. "It was your mother's," Nasat said softly, "and her mother's before her. I know she would want very much for you to have it, the daughter that carried on her family's tradition of becoming healers." Chechla blinked back sudden tears as she held it out to her father. Nasat accepted the pendant and carefully fastened it around her neck, taking her hand and kissing it gently, before she marveled at it once more. "It suits you, sister," her brother smiled. "That it does," Nasat agreed, as he turned to his son and held out a slightly larger box. Tychist took it from his father's hands and opened it, staring in shock as he lifted out a gleaming gold medallion, hanging from a dark blue ribbon of finely embroidered cloth. "It is your Coeur de Lion," he said hoarsely. "You were awarded this on Uzonks." He gazed upon it with almost religious awe, before closing his eyes and holding it out to his father. "It is too much," Tychist whispered. "I cannot accept this." Nasat merely smiled and closed his son's fingers around the medal. "There is a reason I chose this for you," he said gently. "I was awarded many decorations during my time, but that was the first. The one that taught me that they were both a blessing and a curse." He glanced over at Tango, sharing a look with her as she watched stoically over them. "That you have chosen to become a diplomat, to try and find ways to prevent war." His eyes were wet as he gazed lovingly at his son. "I present you this small token, in the hopes that no one will ever be awarded another again." He suddenly reached out and gathered his children tightly, holding them close. "I love you both so very much," he said softly, "and I know your mother is watching over you both as well." Nasat hugged them fiercely, not wanting to let go, until finally Tango made a small noise in her throat. Reluctantly, he loosened his grip. "And now we must depart," he sighed, "so that the world may see what I do." "We love you too, father," Chechla whispered, as her brother nodded solemnly in agreement. Nasat took their hands once more, rising to his feet, as Tango led the trio to the waiting limousine.